Hey, what's up guys, it's DarkArmedDuelist, and today doing some Shinobird test hands. So I'm really excited this for you guys because this deck was actually suggested to me by one of my patrons, Tyler. And this deck is an amazing deck that revolves around summoning out all sorts of really awesome spirit monsters and even ritual summoning into some really cool ritual monsters. So without further ado guys, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell in there so you can become part of the notification squad, and definitely check out the Patreon down in the description below for all those awesome rewards, like in your name description every single video, getting assigned cards in the mail, and even getting your requested deck profile every single month to your patron, along with test hands. And definitely give Tyler some love down in the comments down below for suggesting such an awesome deck. So let's get straight on into this one, guys. So this deck is a super fun deck that revolves around summoning out all sorts of really powerful ritual monsters, like your Shinobird, Baron, and Baroness, which are really powerful cards that can either bounce spells and traps or monsters back into your opponent's deck, which is just really cool to be able to go in for those plays, while also special summoning out spirit monsters from your hand or deck, depending on the Shinobird, Baron, or Baroness that you actually summon, which is really awesome. And if you guys would like to check out the deck profile, as always, it is down in the description down below. But this deck is really cool because you can also summon out cards like Yata-garasu, which just recently came off the list back to 1, which is just absolutely insane because it's been at 0 for almost 20 years. And even summon out cards like Amano Iwado that can completely lock down your opponent, which is really cool. And you guys know it's dad rule number 1 that we gotta pile shuffle the deck. If you don't pile shuffle the deck, then you run the risk of bricking. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for our first test hand, because this deck is just super fun to be able to play. So we're going to go ahead and draw and see what we can get. So we're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Pre-Preparation of Rites. It's already really good to get that card into our hands so we can get our ritual monster and our ritual spell. A copy of the Shinobird Peacock. This is already full setup with this particular hand, as long as we draw into either an Amano Iwado or a Yata-garasu. A copy of Pre-Preparation of Rites, which we can only use one of them per turn. A copy of Pre-Preparation of Rites. And finally, a copy of Preparation of Rites. They really want us to be prepared for the ritual summon. Like, really want us to be prepared for that ritual summon. Like, we've made sure that our pre-preps are pre-prepped and they are pre-prepped to be pre-prepped. So we pretty much have it all. We got it under control. So we're gonna go ahead and activate the copy of Pre-Preparation of Rites to be able to grab from the deck a copy of the Transonic Bird and a copy of our the ritual spell that actually searches it. That amazes me. We drew all 3 copies on the first hand, but it's fine because we have plenty of plays that we can actually go into with this particular setup. So we're gonna go ahead and add that from deck to hand, and then once we do, we're gonna go ahead and activate the copy of Preparation of Rites to be able to grab from our deck to our hand our copy of Chalice Slime to be able to get another monster on the field, which is really cool because a copy of Chalice Slime will be able to summon out incantations from the deck just by discarding a card. So we're going to go ahead and use the copy of our Chalice Slime, just revealing it to the opponent, and then once we do, we're going to discard one of our 3 copies that we had of Pre-Preparation of Rites to be able to summon out a copy of our Talismandra to our side of the field to get a search of a ritual monster, which is really cool just to be able to grab that card from deck to hand, which we're actually going to grab the copy of the Peacock from our deck to our hand. So this is where it gets really interesting with this particular lineup, because you can actually kind of pick and choose which one you think you're going to summon. But since we don't have a ritual monster, or a spirit monster, excuse me, in our hand, we're actually going to go for the play to be able to summon out to our side of the field our copy of our Baroness, because Baroness is just such a better card if your opponent plays spells and traps if you don't have a spirit monster in your hand. Your copy of your Peacock Baron will actually summon out a ritual or spirit monster from the hand, which is really cool to summon spirit monsters in the hand, but your copy of Baroness summons them from the deck, which is really cool to get a Mono Iwado on your side of the field. So what we're going to do at this point is activate the copy of our Sonic Tracker to be able to summon out our copy of Transonic Bird, which is a really good card to be able to ritual summon out to our side of the field by just sending from our hand to the graveyard our copy of our Baron. And once we summon out that card to our side of the field, you have some really good plays that you can actually pull off with this particular lineup, because during the opponent's turn, your copy of Transonic Bird has a really really insane effects. This card has the ability that you can ritual summon this card with a sonic tracker. And once per turn, you can reveal a ritual spell in your hand and add a ritual monster from your deck to your hand, whose name is listed on that card, and if you do, shuffle the revealed card into the deck. And then once per opponent's turn, quick effect, you can send a ritual spell from your deck to the graveyard, and this effect becomes that card's effect. That ritual summons a ritual monster. And then when this card is activated, if a ritual summon or card is tributed, then you can target one face-up card your opponent controls and negate its effects until the end of the turn, which is a really good effect. And you can't forget about the effect of our sonic tracker as well. That is a really insane effect that it has the ability that basically you can use this card to ritual summon out your transonic bird, but you must also tribute monsters in your hand or field whose level is equal to 4 or more. And the level of the monster special by this effect becomes the total levels of that monster used for its ritual summon, which is really cool because basically what just happened is this card became a level 8, which is really cool. So we can actually summon out our copy of our peacock by just tributing it, which is really cool, while also being able to negate a card on the field with its other effect because we're going to tribute a ritual summoned monster. But this is really neat because basically these are level 8, C2, 4, 6, 8 on in your graveyard as well. So you can actually use your copies of Shinobird Ritual to be able to banish them from the graveyard to be able to ritual summon, which is really cool. So at this point, we're just going to pass over to the opponent. And once we pass over to the opponent, we're just going to let them go ahead and do their thing. But as soon as they set a card on the field that's a spell or trap, or as soon as they activate a field spell or something like that, we can then go ahead and use the effect of our Transonic Bird to be able to ritual summon out our copy of our Shinobird, which is really good to be able to put that card on our side of the field by just sending Shinobird Calling to the graveyard from our deck off the copy of the Transonic Bird's effect, basically being able to ritual summon by sending that ritual spell from our deck to the grave, which is a really good effect because now we're just going to special summon this card to our side of the field, bouncing a spell or trap our opponent controls back to their deck, which is really cool because this card has the ability that basically you can shuffle up to 3 spells and traps on your opponent's controls into the deck, and then you can special summon a level 4 lower spirit monster from your deck, ignoring its summoning conditions, which you're always going to summon off this card's effect, our copy of a Mono Iwado, because this card basically locks down the opponent, which is a really good effect. This card has the ability can't be special summoned, and monsters cannot activate their effects except spirit monsters, so we're totally in to go in for game, which is really cool, because we have plenty of plays that we can actually pull off with this particular lineup, and our copy of our Baroness will actually bounce back to our hand, giving us 2 tokens on our side of the field during the end phase, which is really nice. But the Amano Iwado, since it wasn't normal summoned or flip face up, will actually stay on the field and not return itself to the hand, which is really interesting about the way that your Shino Baron and Baroness actually work. So at this point, we're going to let our opponent go ahead and do their thing, which they're not going to be able to activate any monster effects that's in grave, that's in hand, that's in field, that's anywhere. They cannot activate any monster effects except for effects of spirit monsters, which is kind of neat. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and bounce this back to our hand, saying that our opponent ended their turn, and then we're going to put on our side of the field a copy of each of these cards, which is really cool. But we did have to banish off our copy of our card to be able to summon out that copy of Peacock to begin with, which we totally forgot to do, but that's totally fine. So at this point, we're going to summon out these 2 cards on our side of the field, which are 1500 attack apiece and win monsters, which is really cool just to put these cards on our side of the field, and they are for level 4s as well, so you can actually go in for some really interesting plays if you want to from the X check, or even link summon if you want to go in for a really powerful monster. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and draw for turn. We're going to go ahead and draw into a copy of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, which is totally fine. We're not going to really use that card at all. We actually have the copy of the Preparation of Rites that we can actually resolve in our hand to be able to grab from our deck our copy of Shinobird Calling and a copy of the Baron, which is really cool to be able to grab that card, or you can just be able to ritual summon out your copy of your Baroness. Again, if your opponent has a spell or trap, to be able to summon out a copy of Yata-garasu, which is a really good play if you can pull it off and your opponent sets another spell or trap to their side of the field, which is really nice when they do that, because then you get to be able able to yata lock your opponent. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and ritual summon out another one of our Shinobirds to our side of the field by just using the effect to be able to either tribute a monster on our side of the field, which you're going to have to tribute a monster, some monster on the field, which I'm actually going to tribute off the copy of our Transonic Bird on our field, or we can just leave that card just in case we want to use it later. We can actually tribute off these two monsters on our side of the field to be able to just get one of those tokens off the field and be able to keep the other one so we can clean up some of our zone. So at this point, we're going to summon out the copy of the Baron Peacock to our side of the field just to give us another monster on the side of the field that has 3,000 attack points, and just start attacking the opponent with these two monsters, which is really cool. If our opponent does out the board, we do have the Interrupted Kaiju Slumber that we can destroy all the monsters and be able to go in for more plays, because we're going to give us a really big kaiju and our opponent's going to get a really small one, which is really cool. And then you can use cards like your Peacock to be able to bounce them back to hand, which is really cool when it's ritual summoned. So at that point, that's pretty much going to do it for our first test hand, but let's go ahead and see what we can do for our next one, because as you guys can see, this deck is super consistent, giving us 3 pre-preparations of rights during the first turn. Even when you pile shuffle, sometimes you will get that, because it just happens in the decks when you, even if you play like more than 40 cards, which this deck is actually 42, which is really weird to be able to draw all 3 copies of that card, but it worked out totally fine because we drew 3 consistency cards, which is really nice. So we're gonna go ahead and shuffle up the deck again and see what we can pull off for our next one, because as you guys can see, this deck is super fun to be able to play and just basically locks down the opponent, which is really fun. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one, because this deck is just really cool. So at this point, we're going to draw into a copy of Pre-Preparation of Rights, hopefully not 3 copies of it, a copy of Manju, a copy of Gamma Seal, a copy of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, and a copy of Gandarla. So this is actually very much a going second hand, but you can go first with this hand because we have 3 going second cards in our hand to be able to get rid of basically any monster that our opponent has, which is really cool. And if we did go second, because this deck is a very powerful going second deck, we would draw into a copy of our Talismandra, which would be really good because we have 2 searches in our hand, which is really nice. So at this point, what we're going to do is just go ahead and go first, which we're going to activate the copy of, or actually normal summon the copy of Manju to our side of the field to be able to grab a monster from the deck, which I'm actually going to grab a copy of the Baroness, which is going to give us more plays. You can grab the copy of Baron if you know what you're playing against, but I just like to grab the copy of the Baroness if I know that I'm not gonna have a spirit monster in the hand to be able to summon out to my side of the field. So that's very important to be able to kind of pick and choose which one you have. But if you have a copy of Amano Iwado already in the hand, or yata-garasu, you can basically just summon out the copy of the Baron, which is totally fine. And it's better going second anyways, because you can give your opponent a kaiju and then bounce the kaiju back to hand. And if they still have a monster that you can't out, you can just give them the kaiju right back and then use the copy of the Baron to go over it, which is really cool. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and use the effect of our copy of the Pre-Preparation of Rights to be able to grab from deck to hand our Transonic Bird all over again and its ritual spell, which is really important to have going first, which is just such a good card because it lets us ritual summon during the opponent's turn. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and use one of my 2 kaijus in my hand to actually ritual summon this card out to the side of the field to make it a level 8 monster. So we're just going to use the copy of our Gandarla in our hand to be able to make that card a level 8, which is really cool because the Gandarla is a level 8 monster, which is really nice. You can use the copy of Gamma Seal if you want to. It's totally up to you which one you use, but I usually like to use the larger kaiju to be able to go in because I know I'm going to have the smaller one to give to the opponent. But now we have this card on our side of the field, which is really nice. So we're going to go ahead and pass over to the opponent. Once we pass over to the opponent, we're going to do the same thing that we did the first time. Use the Transonic Bird's effect to be able to send Shinobird Calling from our deck to the graveyard, but this time we're actually going to use the Transonic Bird to be able to summon out our copy of our Peacock to our side of the field, which is really good because now we can summon out the copy of Mono Iwado as long as you bounce a spell or trap off of its effect. You can't summon unless you bounce, which is really kind of interesting about this card, but I guess it totally makes sense to balance the card. But I really like that effect to be able to just bounce those spells and traps back to the opponent's hand, or back to the opponent's deck, excuse me, which is just really good. I really love that effect. So let's go ahead and shuffle up the deck and see what we can do for the rest of this test hand. So at this point, we pretty much have the opponent locked because They're not going to be able to activate anything except for spirit monster effects, and we do have the copy of the Baroness, which is really, really good to have on the field. But at this point, their opponent's probably going to pass back to us. So once they pass back to us, this is going to return back to the hand. We're actually going to get 2 tokens on our side of the field, which is really good to get those 1500 attack point tokens on the field. And at this point, we're going to go ahead and draw for turn into a copy of Gamma Seal, which isn't going to help us all that much, but it is really nice to be able to put that card on our side of the field. You can Link Climb if you want to at this point, because we don't have an incantation monster on the field. You can make a Link 4 if you want to make a Link 4. It's totally up to you what you want to make. You can go in for a Boral Sword if you want to, which is a really good play, or you can just climb into some really powerful Link monsters if you want to out some cards that your opponent's playing, which is really, really nice. For example, if you want to summon out a copy of Cerberus, you can go ahead and just link these cards away on your side of the field, and now your opponent can activate monster effects, but that's totally fine because we're just going to summon out a copy of Cerberus to be able to pop a monster on the field, which we can just use one of our 2 Gamma Seals, or we can actually just use the Interrupted Kaiju Slumber to be able to pop a monster on the field, which is really, really good. But at this point, you can go ahead and link these 2 away to be able to summon out something else, like a copy of Nightmare Unicorn to spin a card, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to go ahead and spin a card. You don't go into the extra deck all that much, but when you do, you go into some really, really good plays. So what we're going to do is go ahead and discard this card from our hand, or you can go ahead and discard the Baroness, because you usually are going to go in for game at this point to be able to spin a card back into the deck, and then you can go ahead and use the last token that we have on our side of the field just to give us an additional attribute to summon out a copy of our Link Spider, and then use these 2 on our side of the field to go in for an Access Code Talker, which is really good because now this card is a 5,300 attack point monster because we have the copy of the Nightmare Unicorn in the graveyard, which is really, really good. Just have that card in the graveyard while also having 2 different attributes in the grave, which is really nice. You can summon Nightmare Phoenix instead of the Cerberus if you want to pop a back row instead. Totally up to you, but at this point, we're going to go ahead and give our opponent a Kaiju. We're going to get a Kaiju to help us go in for game, and then you can basically just banish from the graveyard your copy of Link Spider to be able to pop the Kaiju that you gave them, and then you can bounce or pop any other card with the copy of the Nightmare Unicorn, which we already span a monster, and we already popped a monster, and then we popped another monster, and then we popped the copy of our Kaiju that we gave to the opponent off of a monster that we tributed, and then you got to pop another card with the copy of our Nightmare Unicorn being banished off the copy of the access code. So at this point, we can go in and attack with these 2 monsters, which is a lot of damage, which is just really, really good. So let's go ahead into the next one and see what we can do for the next test hand, because as you guys can see, this deck is super consistent in what it can do. It's very easy to summon out monsters from the extra deck as long as you don't have an incantation. You could have gone for Boral Sword if you wanted to, but you wouldn't got as many bounces or pops in that particular lineup. But if you want to go for something more budget than an access code, you totally can put a copy of Boral Load or Boral Sword in this particular deck. Totally up to you what you want to play in the extra, because you don't go into it all that often, but it is something that you do go into every so often in this particular build. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one. It's just such a good card to be able to summon out that copy of Amano Iwato. It's just such a good card to be able to summon to the field and just go in for all sorts of different plays and basically lock the opponent down and give them that one-sided skill drain, which is really cool for everywhere, which is just really, really nice. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for our next test hand. We're gonna go ahead and cut the deck and see what we can do. So we're gonna go ahead and draw into a copy of Amano Iwato right off the bat, a second copy of Amano Iwato, and a copy of our Interrupted Kaiju, all 3 of them, okay, and a copy of our Kandal. That's kind of a weird hand, okay. But pretty much if you're going second, you can't do anything going first at all. You can normal summon a Mono Iwato and then pass, which is something about this deck that it does very, very good going second. But going first, sometimes you'll get weird hands like this where you'll draw all 3 copies of a Mono Iwato and you'll be like, wait a minute. So if we did go second, because we're going to say we couldn't do anything going first, if we did go second, we're going to draw into a copy of Gamma Seal. So at this point, you can do some plays because you can activate the copy of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber and then be able to pop all the monsters on the field and then give your opponent a Kaiju, and then we get a Kaiju, which is going to help us out a lot to be able to get a Kaiju on our side of the field. We're actually going to summon the copy of Gandarla to our side of the field, and we're going to summon out a copy of Gamma Seal to our opponent's side of the field because we want the bigger of the 2 Kaijus, which is really, really important so we can attack over it. So at this point, we can normal summon out the copy of the Amano Iwato if you wanted to. You can normal summon it out to begin with if you wanted to normal summon it out to begin with. Totally up to you, but then you can just swing at the opponent with these 2 monsters, which is totally fine. But then at this point, this card's going to come back to hand. We did board wipe our opponent's entire monster lineup, and depending on what they do during the next turn, they're still going to have to deal with another copy of Gameciel, which is really good. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and draw again into a copy of Dolgaran this time, which is kind of neat because now we're drawing all the kaijus. We're going to give that copy of the Gameciel to the opponent, swing through it, and then just keep going with plays like that, like normal summoning Yamato Iwato, and keep going. So let's go ahead and do one more, because that was a little bit of a brick if we were going first. That was a complete brick if we were going first, but that's totally fine, because with decks like this where you're playing kaijus and Yamato Iwatos that are going to return to the hand, you're going to have a deck that really does focus around going second, because your cards are going to return back to your hand. You're going to need cards to bounce on the field with your copies of your Shinobirds, but it's just a very going second strong deck. But cards like Transonic Bird give you that way to be able to play first, which is really cool about this deck. So just to show you guys a little bit of the weakness of the deck, because it does have moments when you get to go first and you don't want to go first in this deck because your opponent's not going to have any cards to bounce, which is very, very important to have. So let's go ahead and see what we can do for the next one. So we're going to draw a copy of Pre-Preparation Rites. We're already okay. A copy of Gandarla, Talismandra, a copy of Pre-Preparation Rites, don't be a third one, and a copy of Shinobird's Calling. So let's see what we can do with this hand. This is actually a very easy hand to play, because we're just going to use this card in our hand to be able to grab the exact monsters that we need, which is always going to be Transonic Bird if you're going first, which we're going to grab that copy, or actually that's the wrong one. We're actually going to grab a copy of the Transonic Bird and its ritual spell from deck to hand. It's very important to play its ritual spell because you need to be able to ritual summon it out to your side of the field with it so that you can make it a level 8, but you also have to play at least one copy of it for pre-prep, which is very important. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and use the effect of our Talismandra to be able to reveal it in the hand with our copy of our Transonic Bird to be able to summon out or search out a copy of our Kandal so that we can then search out a copy of Shinobird Calling, or we can actually search out a copy of Incantation Inception. Totally up to you which one you grab. And I'm actually going to grab the Shinobird's Calling from my deck to my hand because of the effect of the Transonic Bird, where you can actually reveal that ritual spell in the hand, grab a monster that's listed on it from the deck to the hand, and then put that ritual spell back, which is really nice. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and use the copy of the Sonic Tracker to be able to send our copy of Gandarla from hand to grave to summon out the copy of the Transonic Bird, which will come out as a level 8 because we did use the copy of the Gandarla. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and reveal that copy of the Shinobird Calling to be able to search from the deck our copy of Peacock, just like we did before, which is going to be the Baroness this time. Totally up to you which one you grab. I like to grab Baroness because it does bounce those spells and traps, and also lets us summon a Mono Iwato during the opponent's turn, essentially locking the opponent down, which is really, really good. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and let our opponent do their thing, and then we're going to use the effect of Transonic Bird's effect to be able to then send from our deck to the graveyard the ritual spell, the, let's see, where is it? Our copy of our Shinobird's Calling to be able to ritual summon out our copy of Peacock, attributing itself to then bounce 3 spells or traps back into your opponent's deck, and then we can summon out a copy of Mono Iwato onto our side of the field just like we did before, which is really, really good because now we've locked down the opponent again, while also having us 2 monsters on the field to protect our life points. So we have some really, really good plays with this lineup. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and say the opponent passes. We're going to get our copy of the Peacock back to hand, and then summon out our 2 tokens to our side of the field. And then at this point, we're going to go ahead and draw for turn into a copy of our Peacock from our deck to our hand, and then we're going to go ahead and reveal the copy of the pre-prep to activate and search out from the deck another copy of the Shinobird Calling, which is going to be right here, and a copy of our Baron Peacock, which is really good to be able to grab that card, especially if our opponent summoned a monster to their side of the field, because now we can out it and then special summon out a spirit monster from the hand if we had one, which is really nice. So we're going to go ahead and use the Shinobird Calling to be able to get these cards off our side of the field and then summon out our copy of our Shinobird Peacock to our side of the field, which is really, really nice just to get that card on the field so that we can go in for more plays. You guys might be wondering at this point why the Mono Iwato did not return to the hand because it is a spirit monster. Well, that's because we special summoned it off the copy of our Baroness, which is really neat because if you special summon it off of a Baron or Baroness, it ignores summoning conditions where it can be special summoned. And since it wasn't normal or flip face up, you don't return it to the hand, which is really neat. So at this point, we can go ahead and attack with 3K. and attack with 19, which is really cool. But at this point, we're going to go ahead and pass back over to the opponent, which is going to give us 2 more 1500 attack point tokens, which we're going to put those in defense position. And you guys can see where this is going. We're then going to link summon during the following turn to go into like a Boral Load, Boral Sword, Access Code, whatever card you want to go for to just basically clean up the game, which is really nice. So I think that pretty much shows how the deck works. This deck is super fun to be able to play. Sometimes you will draw into 3 copies of Pre-Preparation of Rites, and sometimes you will draw into 3 copies of Mono Iwado. But when you do, you can still play with it if you're going second, which is really, really cool. I really like this deck. It's super fun to be able to play, and as you guys can see, it's super, super consistent to be able to get to those really powerhouse cards like a Mono Iwado. You don't summon out Yata-garasu all that much. I think this card is totally fair at 1 because, as you can see, I didn't summon it. Late game, you will summon it, but early game, like we were playing, you're not going to see this card come out all that often because your opponent's going to have a bunch of cards on the field. You're going to want to summon a Mono Iwado to be able to lock the board, and this card is very vulnerable because it only has 200 attack points, which is why you guys did not see me summon this card going first or second, because it is very vulnerable to being attacked over. So that's it for this one, guys. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Definitely tell me what you think of this deck down in the comments down below. If you guys would like to check out the deck profile, as always, it is down in the description down below. But anyways, guys, this is DarkArmedDuelist, and we'll see you guys in the next video. See you later, guys.